One of the most frightening and magical creatures in Irish and Scottish legend is the Banshee. Known as the Fairy of Death, a visit from the Banshee foretells a certain demise of a family member or loved one. Described as a beautiful young maiden in flowing white robes, the Banshee often delivers her death curse while floating above water or riding upon the back of a galloping steed. Only her crimson eyes betray her inhumanity, for otherwise she looks like just a normal woman. More horrifying than her appearance are the tortured wails and the moans that she cries out just before the moment of death. So the next time you hear a distant howl, think twice. It could be a neighborhood dog baying at the moon, or it might just be the Banshee coming to pay you a visit. Tonight, on the Conspiracy Collective, we're going to take a look at the Banshee and look at the myth and the lore behind her. So sit back and enjoy our story time. Welcome to the Conspiracy Collective with Jill and Joe, your two favorite conspiracy theorists. And tonight we're talking about the Banshees. So the Banshees are found in Irish and Scottish folklore, dating back to about the 8th century. And they are fairies who scream as an omen of death. That's why they're screaming.
Something's going wrong.
Mm-hmm. Now, typically it's going to be an omen that a family member in your family is going to be dying soon.
Okay.
So, and apparently each person in your family has their own Banshee.
Oh.
So,
mm-hmm.
So if you're, well, I don't know, are you Irish?
Why is it only got to be the Irish? I feel like that's not fair.
You have like La Llorona and the Chupacabra. You're good. You don't need a Banshee.
It doesn't sound as fun as a fairy Banshee.
All right, well, we'll see. Maybe we'll dig something up.
It's not fair.
So each member would have a Banshee, and if you're going to die, your Banshee is going to start screaming.
Okay.
Now, they're always female. However, their age, what they're wearing, and their hair can all be different. So I guess it just depends on...
Would it parallel the individuals that they are connected to?
Right. Now, it wasn't until later that they were viewed as evil. And
what did they do?
Well, they're women. So this is folklore. Obviously, they have to be evil.
Which wasn't always the case.
Exactly.
When you look back to the feminine, it was revered, and it's said that the feminine energy kept warring nations settled, basically. And that way it was when we had the shift from feminine energy to male energy that all the warring began in ancient times. So that would, I believe, parallel or speak to the fact that Banshee initially was looked at as favorable, I guess you could say.
Right.
And as things shifted over into the male energy, they would get a bad rap.
Okay, that's true. And
Potentially.
along with the evil thing, they so instead of being like a fairy that was alongside of you and sort of watched out for you, but then if you were dying, it would scream because it was mourning or going to be mourning your death and foretelling of your death. When the tale turned to the banshees being evil, they were saying that they were screaming because they were angry and that they hated the family. And there was no warning of impending doom to the family member. They just hated you that much that they were just screaming at you.
The shrill scream.
Mm-hmm. Which apparently you know pretty well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we won't get into it, but yeah, okay. We've had a few run-ins.
Okay.
So, the Banshee...
So the typical look for a Banshee, okay? This is the typical Banshee look. She has long streaming hair. She wears a gray cloak over a green dress, and her eyes are red, and she was continually crying. And some have said on the opposite that she could be dressed in all white, so the lady in white, with red hair and a ghastly complexion. And apparently there's a first-hand account by a woman who wrote a book called Lady Wild, The Ancient Legends in Ireland. So she had a first-hand account with a banshee, apparently. But her physical, like I said, her physical description will differ between regions, just like a lot of these folklores. It's just indigenous to wherever you are.
But they're more prevalent in Irish community.
Mm-hmm. And it's said that the majority of the tales of the Banshee is her height is usually short, anywhere between 1 to 4 feet tall. And I know how you like those short girls. That could be your problem. Mm-hmm.
This may be an issue for me.
See, it's all in common. Her exceptional shortness often goes alongside the description of her as being an old woman. Now that you have a problem with, you're good off that. However, when they're talking and they're describing her stature as being so small, it kind of coincides with the fairy creature and the fae.
So fairies, I've heard fairies, and you think of Tinkerbell, whatever, but then you go deeper, you hear about these fairy rings. And I've heard about the fairy ring in a variety of contexts. And one of the more recent ones, I believe, I was reading one of Tom DeLonge's books, and it's a fictional story. Anyway, one of the characters is introduced to a fairy ring in one of her adventures. I'd never heard of it until then, and then you mention it now. We've done some other research and come across fairy rings and all that. So, what which came first, the fairy or the banshee? They meld together. What is the root of the fairy, I guess?
Right. I have no idea.
All these fairies.
I mean, I'm not really well versed in the fairy lore.
So it's also the fae, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really, I feel like, a across the pond
you
story.
think it's a European type deal?
Like, I know that there's a lot of there's a lot of people that talk about the fairy realm over here, but I really feel like it really, really came from over there.
Yeah, so the book, it was one of the Secret Machines books. I believe it's the second one. Maybe the first one. Character goes to her dad when he lives in Europe, and she's on his estate, huge estate, and something draws her out, and she's out, in the ground, and she remembers a little ring with a bench. So she goes out for some reason to look at it, and then she has an experience out there. But it was a fairy ring. That's interesting. I think we also talked about the Fae with the when we were talking about Hellier, right? Didn't
Right.
come up in Hellier?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and usually they're like in the garden and they're protecting your home, or they're causing, they're tricksters and they're wrecking havoc. So it's sort of like a mischievous thing, or it's a, you're at one and at peace with them. Like they help you go to sleep and your flowers grow because the fairies were in your garden and they, sprinkled their magic fairy dust all over the place, and now your plants are, big and blooming. Or they're mischievous and they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, like they're misplacing things, they're tricksters, that type of thing. And they're also male. So they're not just
the
female.
Gremlins?
I guess, maybe.
Right? Because Harley riders, they put the bell to chase away the gremlin, right?
I guess so.
They put a little tiny bell on their motorcycles to chase away the gremlin.
On their motorcycle?
Mm-hmm.
What was it going to do to their motorcycle?
So, you've seen the Twilight Zone with Shatner?
Mm-hmm.
He's in the airplane, and then there's this goblin on the outside of the plane tearing it apart. So that's also a big thing in the airplane industry, if you didn't know. Gremlins. So anything that would cause issue with mechanical devices that would cause them to fail, they are wicked superstitious in the airline industry. Like they don't even reuse. I heard this secondhand, so don't quote me out there, people. But they will not reuse parts. Like they won't take a part from plane A and put it in plane B because they're worried it may transfer gremlins. Like it's a wicked superstition, apparently. So that also carries over into things like, guys in their bikes, and they don't want, mechanical problems to happen because they're thinking that there's a giant gorilla on their back or something
mm-hmm.
will go wrong. It can happen, but they're mischievous. And, does that play into the fairy thing? But back to the Banshee, like, is the Banshee, when she's wailing, is she only there to warn you that something's going to happen, or is she trying to lure you into something?
Well, okay, so according to this, several banshees appear at once to indicate the death of someone great or holy. So you're going to get a bunch of banshees that come out if you're holy or if you were great. And then it also, there's a tale of banshees coming together that were called a fairy, which was a ghost of a person, or I'm sorry, of a woman that was murdered, or a mother that died in childbirth. So they sort of, I think that in the fairy realm, or they're in the fairy realm, but then to be called to be something else, sort of like if you had, what was it back in like King Arthur's time? Like if you were a witch, but then you were called to be one of the holy women, and then you were chosen to be the caretakers of something specific. That sort of is like the succession of how this works. So I think you can be a fairy, but you're meant to be the caretaker and the overseers of murdered women or women that have died in childbirth. Like that's your sacred. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, these fairies I don't think I'd want to encounter a banshee. I want to get something bad's going to happen, right?
Well, and that's really the thing, is that they are the harbingers of death.
So collectively, we anticipate danger. Like, you know, as a species, since we have one collective mind, essentially, when we can sense it, I guess you could say. We can't perceive it, but I think some of the people that are more in tune with themselves or whatever it is, or the other world or vibrations or whatever, I feel that they pick up on bad things that are going to occur, and somehow this manifests in some fashion. Could be a banshee.
And it also says that if you have a loved one that has died and you are so heartbroken over it and you just don't want to live anymore and you ask for death, then the banshee will grant your wish, because they're helping you to eliminate the suffering and ease the heartache of the situation. So if you just can't take it anymore and you ask to go be with your loved one, then they will take it upon themselves to go ahead and push you over to the other side.
And you hear stories all the time where lifelong, partners, one dies, another one dies, hours, a couple days, relatively short distance, apart from each other. So, I mean, is it possible?
Broken heart, right?
Could the broken heart summon the banshee, like you're saying?
Now,
is that possible?
Maybe. There's also a notated thing that the banshee will accept alcohol as payment, and okay, so basically there's a banshee, right? Or there's a woman. I'm sorry. There's a woman that lives a not straight line sort of life, like not, she's a little risque in the way she's
a hood rat.
And she's destined to become a banshee, right? And so she takes alcohol and whatever other things you want to give her. And due to the sin of drinking, she will turn into a banshee, and the sin of her lifestyle. So it's also it's a warning to women to live a straight and narrow life, because if you don't, you could be turned into a banshee.
Oh, so there's a little bit of cautionary tale in there also.
Well, listen, I should have been a banshee a long time ago then.
Oh. Well, maybe it happens in the next life. I mean,
maybe it's still coming.
Yeah, maybe it's still on the road.
Now, banshees can also manifest themselves to look like beautiful women, which made me start to kind of wonder about the succubus.
Oh. Well, the succubus was a slave to the devil, right?
Yeah, she's a demonic entity that comes to you at night and basically has sex with you, and then during the act sucks the life force out of you.
Oh God, that's happened to me so many times.
So yeah, banshees can be not just looking like a crone. They can also look beautiful.
So they're much more than just the harbingers of death. Then they play other roles.
Could be.
This one's an interesting one. I didn't know where this was going to go. I wasn't sure. Banshee.
Yeah.
You think of banshee, you think of sirens. So also, like, another thing that we had talked about before, where we were talking about Hellier and the cave systems and the entities that were in there, the goblins or whatever, and I think we had talked about or touched on that they would call out to you and or mimic babies crying or something like that to lure you in.
A siren will, yeah.
Yeah. Do you see any of that with a banshee, or is that strictly the
No,
siren thing? Or
they don't front like that.
they don't want to do harm to you?
It depends on the area and what the folklore is saying. So some say they're evil, some say that they are only strictly just harbingers of death. Now, there is a Scottish folklore about something called a washerwoman, and she's a human that gets turned into a banshee, and she'll remain a banshee until the age that she was supposed to die at. So if she's turned into a banshee at say 25, but she's not supposed to, really die until, she's 50, then she's going to remain a banshee for those many years.
Banshees are spooky.
Well,
but you don't normally hear of them in the United States, right?
Primarily. Not really. It's sort of it's a Scottish and a Celtic thing.
Would they have an American counterpart? You think? I've never heard of one. I don't know that they would.
I don't know.
Because if it's an Irish thing.
Well, and I had no idea that they were a fairy either.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the fairy angle is an interesting angle.
Let's see, a banshee.
Fairy mounds. Mounds are pretty interesting throughout the world too. Y'all should look up mounds. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, and there's a bunch of TV shows about banshees over here.
Fairy forts, they call them.
Oh, really?
Earthen mounds throughout the world. Mm-hmm. They're little built-up mounds in random-ass places all over the world. They've been found in Europe, mainly in Ireland, that type of stuff, but they've also found them here in America.
Oh, really?
They've been. Oh, so you have a lot of guys that go out there and look at the Earth, basically, geologists and all that, and they look at the Earth, and they have these new radars. I don't know what they're called, but they can fly over certain areas, and they can do basically ground penetrating radar, sort of, and they can check for anomalies on the ground, and they found mounds, all sorts of stuff. There's even popular ones in the U.S. That are pretty huge, and a lot of them were covered up over the years, but they've been there for quite a long time. There's a lot of mound structures throughout the U.S., not only just overseas. So I think fairies are kind of play a big role in our history, well, not our history, but our folklore, our mythology.
Mm-hmm.
They've been around.
Well, okay, so in America, in the late 18th century, they were prevalent in the Tar River in North Carolina, and they referred to a banshee as a ghoul, as opposed to a banshee, and it was a sign of misfortune. And then in South Dakota, it said to wail near a hill called Watchdog Butte. So it's really, maybe too, because, America is so young compared to,
Is it though? Is it? Well, our version of it.
Yes.
That's 100% sure, but I feel that there were a lot of civilizations here long before we ever tracked, long before Christopher Columbus came around, even predating some civilizations overseas, I believe. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there that says otherwise. It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
I won't get into it because you can go pretty deep, but I encourage you guys all to do some research about ancient civilizations here in the U.S. They said there was Vikings on the eastern shores long before we ever thought that they were there. You get into the whole Oak Island mystery. That's another big thing. Look up Oak Island and what they're doing now and all the stuff that they're digging up right now. They got a crew out there. It's digging up some really interesting stuff from the Templars and all that. And it's fascinating history that a lot of it got whitewashed. Nobody really knows about it because it didn't come through regular channels. It was all word of mouth. And, there's so much to learn out there. So you guys should check it out.
Another interesting thing that just popped up is that these banshees were said to have pale, really long hair, and they brushed it with a silver comb. Now, that's where the local myth of the mermaids comes into play and how they would get confused with the banshees, because this comb apparently is related to a Irish folktale that if you see a comb laying on the ground in Ireland, you cannot ever pick it up, or the banshee or mermaid, they placed it there, and it's to lure you, an unsuspecting human, away, and that's how they'll get you.
Ooh.
Now, it's not specific if that's specific to mermaid myths or if it's specific to a banshee thing. However, they're so well intertwined that if you were to look those two things up, it could go either way.
There's also a character called the Silver Banshee, part of the Suicide Squad.
Really?
Interesting. Yeah, DC comic. Just saw that. It's funny how there's a lot of things that Hollywood knows about that I don't.
Well, obviously you're not reading enough comic books.
I am not. I'm not on my thing. I'm not on my game. So avoid silver combs.
But
if I hear screaming, run for the hills.
And she can appear at any age that she wants to, and she can be stunningly beautiful as well, like I had said before. So I guess it just depends on who and what she is trying to get resolved. And then I guess, which is kind of strange, the banshee is later also in this lore is could be part of the Morrigan story. So if you know anything about the Morrigan, she's an Irish battle goddess that appears with lots of ravens typically, and she goes to war with the men and fights alongside of them. It's a whole thing. So the banshee is also could be tied into the Morrigan lore deity.
Nice. So it's pretty. Got a lot going out there.
Yeah.
It's pretty pervasive, I guess you can see, in a lot of different areas. It's interesting.
Yeah, she's the goddess of war in the Irish mythology. So yeah, that's a whole other. That goes over to the witch podcast.
Goes deep, huh? Yeah, I hear you. So you mentioned there was a woman that had a first-hand account of Banshee.
Right.
Now, modern times, let's think back to people having experiences with the phenomenon, ghosts and whatnot. Do you think a banshee could potentially be a ghost of a loved one, perhaps, that is coming to warn us of something? Someone we're tied to.
No, because
it's
it's
the
not
other
human.
side.
I don't think it was ever supposed to have been human.
Oh, so it never existed as a human.
Correct.
Okay.
No. Specific to the fairy realm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so not
So fairies aren't rooted in humanity,
they're not.
per se. They're their own thing.
That is correct.
I'm learning, see?
Yeah, no, they're not human at all.
I don't know what to do with this banshee. I don't know where to classify it.
Yeah. And just on a side note, the Morgan, did you, have you ever read anything about like King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay and things like that?
Not really. I was never into the, Knights of the Round Table.
Okay. Well, she's prevalent in that story. But she's got human ties, so. But it's interesting that her last name is Le Fay. Like the Fay.
Oh, the Fae. You really get me today.
I know.
See, it's like everything else. When you start like touching on the one thing, it's like an avalanche. There's so many things that they tie into. Like they don't necessarily stand alone. They're propped up by all these other stories and mythologies and all these other cultures, and it's so big. It's just not one little thing. Like, we're just not talking about a banshee. We're talking about a whole culture wrapped around the banshee and all the other stories that came along with that culture and how they intertwine with each other. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, and the sirens, just on a side note, is from Greek mythology. So you've got Irish folklore, Irish mythology, Greek mythology, and you were asking earlier, how is that different? So a siren is definitely would lure sailors with their singing and their music
to crash, right?
Crash.
To run their ships aground.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it'd be like an ancient gremlin, right? You have a gremlin in a plane. Now you have a siren, which is a gremlin for the sea.
Right.
Right.
And you've got, like
fascinating.
Zeus and Poseidon and Hades, all of that going on with the sirens. And it also says that the sirens are believed to be a combination of a woman and a bird. Because a siren in Greek art is represented as birds with large women's heads on top of them, and bird feathers and scaly feet. So let's see. So they were represented as female figures with legs of birds, with or without wings, playing a variety of musical instruments, especially a harp. Almost like an angel.
It's all about the harp.
Right?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They had
Greek mythology.
Yeah, so they were little birds with women faces. Now, by the Middle Ages, the sirens transformed into mermaids.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then,
they just evolved into a mermaid?
Yep. And then sirens were also shown to be male or female. However, the male sirens disappeared from art around the 5th century.
You stopped talking about them?
Yeah.
Wonder why. A lot of interesting stories.
Yeah.
You gotta wonder. Are they rooted in our base fears? We use these stories to help us deal with those fears, perhaps?
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's kind of, you know, it's kind of sexy and interesting to think that there's these, female mermaids swimming along in the ocean that lure these manly sailors to their deaths, right? But they're so beautiful that they can't help themselves.
Good old Tom Hanks movie Splash.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, sirens are also found in the Odyssey. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got me on this one. I don't know if the Banshee would be real or fake.
Well, it's weird. Like, you've heard of Banshees before, right? Like, you'd never heard of a Wendigo before, right? But you've heard of Banshees. Yeah?
Well, the whole context of the Banshee is like just someone just screaming.
Right. So you think
don't
of like
the back lore.
So you think of just what offhandedly? You think old and floating above you and screaming at you constantly, right? Like
shrilling. Yelling at you. You don't know what's going on. You're just getting yelled at. Yeah.
So, I mean...
Yes. Because I've thrown that name around quite a few times to describe some coworkers.
Right.
Banshee, I swear.
But we never really knew what the myth was behind that. And all the stories. And the fairy. I had no idea she was a fairy. Or they were fairies.
No. I think we should look into fairies.
That I thought was the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
Now... Okay, yes. Now, a succubus is a demon. So maybe you should start calling them succubuses. Because they're demons.
Good idea. Good idea. So is it okay? So if we're dealing with a succubus, where does it take root? Like, is it? I asked earlier if it's part of the devil.
Well, it's a medieval
devil thing. Is it stand on its own?
Well, it's a medieval legend. So it appears in dreams and it takes forms of a woman to seduce a man, usually through sexual activity. Now, there is a male counterpart called a what? You know? An incubus.
Incubus? Oh, really?
Yep, that's the male version of a succubus. Now, religious traditions hold that repeated sexual activity with a succubus can result in the deterioration of your health or mental state and sometimes death. Modern representation of a succubus is that it may or it may not occur in your dreams. But it's always depicted as your greatest fantasy. Like, she's highly the most attractive seductress per whoever it is she's working on, whatever their taste is. However, in the past, in ancient times, the succubus was depicted as demonic looking and kind of frightening, but it wasn't until modern times that she turned into something really beautiful.
Oh, interesting.
So we're like, it might stem from a Jewish folklore.
Succubus?
I mean, because it's going to go all the way back to the Garden of Eden.
No? The Garden of Eden? Were we talking about the snake?
Let's see. So, okay, so not to get off topic, but so Lilith, right? She's supposedly was supposed to be Adam's first wife before Eve, right? Who later turns into a succubus, okay? So she left Adam and refuses to return to the Garden of Eden because she had already mated with the archangel Samuel. Just so you know.
I feel... Are these Gnostic texts? Where's...
It's all for... It's in... it's called the Alphabet of Ben Sira. It's a medieval text.
So Lilith would have been the first wife.
Right. So she was his banshee. In the Kabbalah, there were 4 succubuses that mated with the archangel Samuel as well.
Samuel had a good time then, huh?
So there were 4 original queens of the demonic. One was Lilith. And then there were 3 other ones. The succubus can take the form of a beautiful girl, but closer inspection may reveal that she had deformities of her bodies, like bird claws or a serpent's tail.
So Lilith was an evil.
Well, I mean, supposedly. Let's see. And if you penetrate a succubus, it's like entering an ice cavern. She's an ice queen.
I've met a few of those.
And there's some more other stuff that's a little bit more racy that you can read on your own. But yeah, so then it says in later folklore, the succubus took the form of a siren.
That's interesting. The siren. So if anything's yelling or screaming, just avoid it. Right?
Avoid the ocean. Don't become a sailor. And
don't be
avoid this.
If I hear screams, go the other direction.
Right. And if you hear the screaming, you're probably going to die.
Oh, gosh. Well, no, that'd be someone around me, right? So that'd be good. I could get out.
Okay. Right. So I wonder if, like, the person that's going to die hears the sound of the screaming banshee, or if it's the people around you that hear the screaming banshee. But wouldn't they sort of like, what if you had like a big family and you were like, okay, the banshee's screaming, but we don't know which one of you is going to go? Like, how do you know which one?
Who's banshee screams?
Yeah. If you all have your own. Right. Oh, maybe it's the person who can't hear it.
Can't hear it. Doesn't know what's going on.
Right. So if you are the person that's going to die and you cannot hear the banshee screaming, then obviously you're the one that's going to die. But everybody else.
I really feel like if your banshee is your banshee and they're helping you out.
No, she's just sad that you're dying. She's not going to help you.
You could warn her brother, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey,
it's inevitable. You're going out.
These banshees, I tell you, they're already in the half.
Yeah, those women.
They tell everybody else but you.
Would you want your banshee to be beautiful, or would you want her to be like old and haggard?
Well, I don't know. Are we going to be hanging out before I dip out?
That's a succubus.
Well, it's fine. Obviously, I'd want a hot one. I don't want an ugly one.
You need.
Yeah, I don't know. I would obviously err on the side of attractive, regardless.
And I want to know why there's no male banshees.
There are.
There are.
There are. Yes.
What are they called?
Guess what the name is? A Banshee. I'm serious. I wouldn't fool you.
Okay, tell me.
Tell me. It's a Banshee. Let me pull it up. Where did it go? I lost it. Oh, God. Oddly enough, he's got a cold number, too. And let's see. Yep, male Banshee. Commonly called a Banshee, can lure unsuspecting young women to his lair with his fluffy wave of his hair and a bellow of his pleasing baritone voice. When seen, oh no, it's talking about the girl. But yeah, he's out there.
What? But he's not a harbinger of death.
I don't know. Let's find out. Well, this is fandom, so I mean, these are people coming up with their own ideas. Let's see here. There's no more talking about it. I don't know. We should find out what's up with the Banshee now. Because now we're raising up all kinds of issues.
That's okay. I've never heard of that. Well, and obviously he doesn't scream like the woman.
Google says it's true, so.
Well, then it must be.
If it's on the internet,
it has to be. It's huh.
You know, Wikipedia is like just top notch. Cannot say it's wrong. But yeah, I don't know. If there's a Banshee out there, maybe you should give him a call. Say, hey, what's up? What's your story, bro? Why are you hanging out here? What's with the hair? Where's your penis cold?
Huh. That's interesting. Okay.
So if you came across a Banshee, like, would you have a conversation with them? Like, what?
I don't think they can tell you anything other than they're just going to cry. They're just going to cry about it. And why are they?
It sounds like a marriage. I feel like it's just a marriage.
Yeah.
You can have the short woman screaming at you all the time, right? Has no communication skills at all, so you can't convey what's going on. And he's just, yeah, it's a marriage.
Okay.
That's where I think where the Banshee really got its roots. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
They could sugarcoat it with folklore, but I really.
It was made in a.
Adam got sick of his first wife. He's like, "Fuck this, I'm out. I'm done with her." And then all from there, that's where it started. That's where it happened.
It was made in the pub. Okay. Well, I'm gonna find it.
I'm just saying. I'm gonna say this one's real.
Okay.
Because I live with them all the time. You know, they're everywhere. I'm gonna say it's real.
Yeah, and maybe their behavior, maybe it's like that whole DNA thing, like their behavior pattern currently is because of ancestral roots.
Potentially.
Right?
You never know. DNA is a wacky thing.
So maybe they still carry those traits. And you do have a proclivity for a specific type of woman.
Type of Banshee.
So they have to have probably Irish roots.
I don't know what you're saying. It doesn't compute. No.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
It's funny that you bring up the Irish thing because I do believe there's a little bit of Irish there that they don't know about. Must be.
Yeah.
God.
So, okay. So I think that, but I don't know. That's interesting, though, about the fairy mounds.
Yeah. I think that'd be something.
Well, and I just saw that a Banshee might have some roots as Nordic Valkyries.
Valkyrie? Mm-hmm. Isn't that a warrior? A Valkyrie?
I don't know. Let me see.
Valkyrie.
Are you thinking about that movie?
I'm not a fan of him. Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But I am looking forward to Top Gun.
They are female. And they almost look like angelic.
Really?
They look like warrior goddesses, really.
That's what I was thinking. Because they're Nordic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, yeah, totally.
They must be.
Again.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have our work cut out for us. We have a lot to research.
Right. Yeah, who knew this was a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, what did you get into?
I know, I thought this was going to be cut and dry.
You talk about one thing and then it just snowballs. Now we're talking about Valkyries and Adam and Eve and Lilith. You stumped me with that one. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, they're battle maids. Battle maidens. And they fought alongside, obviously, because that's what they did is women fought, right, like not handmaidens, but shield maidens.
You know, I haven't seen Vikings, but isn't that a thing in the show Vikings?
How are we even friends?
What?
Have you not watched?
Isn't that a thing?
It totally was a thing. Shield maidens fought alongside
Okay.
of the regular warriors. So, I mean, men and women fought side by side. So, this Valkyrie thing is a warrior goddess with wings.
So you're saying I should stop looking for a banshee and look for a Valkyrie?
Maybe. I want to see what the connection is. We'll have to see. Here's
I'm just going to put that out. I'm going to put that energy out. Hey, I'm looking for a Valkyrie. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, but I highly doubt they were crying about stuff.
No, they're kicking ass.
Badasses. I don't think they would just like hang around and cry about you dying.
Right. They'd be like, you're dead. Let's light you on fire and take off. I got stuff to do. Yeah. You're good. You're good. You're in Valhalla. Yeah. You're fine. I'll catch you on the backside.
I don't know how they're related, really.
I don't either. Yeah, no. Well, it's Norse. Fairies.
Maybe.
Who knows?
I guess.
Interesting. Well, no, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, so we're going to stop recording right now and you're going to go start watching, what's it called? Vikings.
Okay, I will try. We'll see what happens.
Oh my God, and that's going to open up a whole other rabbit hole, so maybe you shouldn't.
If you give me a Greek mythology, we're gonna
that's coming.
Oh Lord. Okay.
All right, you guys. Thanks for listening to this ramble tonight. And we will get back to you guys soon with another story time.
Go do your research, guys.